Hi, I'm Justin Crosby and welcome to our highlight show rounding up the best content from day 2 of our MIPCOM live streaming show from the Palais de Festival in Cannes. First up is Evan Shapiro, the media commentator whose media universe map and commentary on the future of the content industry has disrupted an industry that some might say has been sleepwalking to disaster in the post-COVID years. Then we dive into a panel session focusing on the fast-evolving world of brand-funded programming, and we have 3 experts to help us unpick the latest trends and opportunities there. Sam Glynne, head of EMEA Entertainment and Culture Marketing at United Talent Agency, Roberta Zamboni, Global Head of Branded Content and Sponsorship at Fremantle, and Javier Martinez, Director of Originals at YouFirst. Thank you to our partners MIPCOM and our sponsors ITV Studios and Shooting in Spain, a brand of ISEX Invest in Spain, for making these shows possible. I hope you enjoy the show. Evan, welcome to the show. Great to have you back on, but first time on a live stream.
Yeah, good to see you.
And you've been around Europe for, how long have you been in Europe now? Because we see you all over LinkedIn.
Yeah, back and forth since August.
Right.
So Copenhagen, Milan, Madrid, Amsterdam, London, Berlin. Now I'm going to Munich next week, or this week actually. So.
Yeah, and you've been down in the Innovation Hub for a couple of sessions, haven't you? Tell us about what you've been doing at MIPCOM.
Yeah, so I opened the Innovation Lab yesterday with a bit of a barn burner, where I basically accused our industry of being in innovation stagnation and challenged us to collaborate better around data in particular, because it is part of what's holding us back. The traditional media ecosystem is losing the battle to big tech, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that way, and it also doesn't necessarily need to be a battle. You can embrace big tech if you understand what the rules of the game are, and most of that is being better with your data. And then after that, yesterday I opened with a bit of a keynote for a Samsung event down near the beach, which was a lot of fun.
Right.
And then this morning I did 6 interviews right in a row with some great folks, President and CEO of Rakuten, Head of Programming for Roku, Justin Sampson from Barb, whom I just did a collaboration with around a big report, probably I think the first of its kind look at apples to apples, side by side, platform by platform, 4-screen total viewing in the UK.
Right, okay. Well, let's delve into that, if you don't mind, a little bit. We just had Andy Fry from MIPCOM News, and he came along to that and saw that session. And now, forgive me if I get this figure wrong, but he said, I think it was 80% of young people, and I don't know exactly what that age range was, are actually using streaming services and YouTube as their go-to media consumption.
That's mostly correct.
Yeah.
16 to 34-year-olds, and pretty much everybody under 35, 80% of their total viewing in any given day or month is a combination of social video and streaming. And now, when you think about this, Barb's data it's 4 screens, but it's also only in-home. So that does not include out-of-home. Imagine how much of share of video viewing would be included or would rise to if it included out-of-home as well.
Yeah.
So what's fascinating is 46% of total viewing of all viewers in the UK in the home is still broadcast. But 46% of total viewing of all viewers in the UK over the age of 4 is a combination of streaming and social video.
Right.
So streaming and social has now basically caught up as a combo to broadcast.
Yeah.
Then when you realize that England is super fucking old, so 58% of the UK is over the age of 35, whereas 55% of the rest of the world is under 35.
Yeah.
And so the viewing habits in the UK haven't necessarily caught up because millennials and Gen Z don't make up as large a share of the population yet. But this is something that I love to tell people, and it seems to be a surprise to them. Generations age.
Yeah.
Every year, more millennials turn 35. Millennials are now 43. Millennials aren't kids, they have kids. And so as they age, they're bringing their viewing habits into the majority. There's this generational shift happening in Europe that's a couple of years behind the US. But as that wave takes hold, younger viewers who do not watch, only 14% of viewing for people under the age of 35 is broadcast. Teeny tiny is pay TV. So, as millennials now take over all the heads of households and the seats in parliament and the tax paying, where they choose to tick that box for the license fee or not.
Yeah.
And as Gen Z, who's now 27 and in parliament, there's a 22-year-old in parliament.
Yeah.
As they decide the next media bill and they don't have a habit of broadcast, are they really going to be so blithe about continuing to greenlight these fees for the public service media? And it really concerns me to the point where I tried to, with this report, ring an alarm.
I mean, do you think that is news to, the BBC? I mean, it's a remarkable statistic, and it's a real eye-opener, and it's I think, a lot of people will be shocked to see that. But I mean, I know certainly, obviously a suite of channels at the BBC. BBC One, I think its average viewer has been around 67, 68 or something like that for a long time. But the BBC in particular doesn't really seem to have grasped this at all at any point in the past. And it doesn't seem like the organisation that it's really able to react, in a fundamental way that it probably needs to.
I think, well, first of all, you have to understand that some of the streaming is iPlayer. So
Okay.
they are,
Okay, so we're including
and they
iPlayer,
were
yeah.
out ahead of most big platforms on the planet.
Yeah.
Not just the UK, but
Yeah.
and in Europe, but around the world. So they do understand the importance of it. But there's two things that I think factor in that are alarming to me. The first and foremost is there are executives there that realize that 40+% of YouTube viewing in the UK is on TV. And they are very protective of their own environment. So they want to try to force all viewers into the iPlayer as opposed to allowing them to watch the content on YouTube. And so they're very concerned about attribution. And I get that, but 0% attribution of a total audience segment is 0%. Any viewing you can get there is really crucial. I also don't think, and I think this is system-wide, not just BBC, but everybody in the TV community in the UK, I think they're not really looking at the population the way that I just talked about it, which is the millennials this wave of new generations is coming, and BBC is still the #1 most watched thing in the UK, but that's not a forever thing. And as as the boomers and Gen X start to disappear, which we all die, right?
Yeah.
And millennials and Gen Z become the majority of the adult population, the majority of heads of household, the majority of people in parliament. This shift is going to come very fast and very violently, and it's going to change the entire viewing construct in the UK. It's going to seem like it was overnight, even though it was much more gradual. And so those two factors, and what's happening is people are now getting their news from YouTube and from TikTok. For people under the age of 35, the top 3 places of viewing are YouTube, Netflix, TikTok. And they're getting their news from these platforms. If the BBC doesn't put its news there, it's ceding these platforms to the bad actors.
Yeah.
These misinformation artists, and this relevancy that they take so seriously is going to go away, and it's going to be harder and harder to justify the license fees there.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know you. So you've been on a big European tour, as we said, this summer. And do you get challenged much? When you're speaking at various different events. Because what?
Who would dare challenge me?
Well, I mean, but I'm really, genuinely interested to know that, because you're obviously presenting your amazing media universe map and lots of thousands of data points within that, and there's lots of proof points there. But I think that the traditional TV industry that you see in many countries in Europe, and I've been to a few this year as well, and the conversations that I'm having are the same conversations that I could have been having 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem that the more traditional players have got it, or any sense of
I do get challenged. It's usually in smaller rooms, because I do meet with pretty much the largest broadcasters in any country. I've had in-depth conversations with them.
Yeah.
And I had one in the Nordics recently, and the largest broadcaster in their country, which I will not name. And it was about news. It was, to me, public service media is really important, not just as an art form, but also because the health of a democracy is usually directly correlated to the health of their public service media.
Yeah.
There are studies about that.
And we're seeing sort of a result of that in the States at the moment, right?
We have no public service media, and therefore we are in utter fucking chaos as a result. There is no watchdog there.
Yeah.
But in Europe, you have this great tradition of truly publicly funded broadcasting, and most important, news and factual entertainment. And again, in every country, the thing I just talked about, the BBC, it's the same thing. They resist putting their news up on YouTube because they feel that it's disintermediating them. And what they're doing is they're basically writing off whole generations from providing news and education that they so desperately need. So I do get challenged in the room, and the challenge usually is always based in feelings.
Right.
Very rarely in data.
As in, this is the way we do it.
This is the way we do it. It will be cannibalized. It will cannibalize our viewing. And I'm like, how do you prove that? Show me how you know that. And I will tell you, I had long conversations with Channel 4 about this over the last couple of years. And in part because of my imploring them, and in part because there are some really smart people at Channel 4, they moved a tremendous amount of, they double book their content, premium long-form series on YouTube. First as an experiment, and now, after seeing the results of it, much more. And what they found is there is no cannibalization. These are two different audiences.
Yeah.
And
it's additive, if anything.
It's additive to the audience, but for Channel 4, it's also additive to the revenue because they survive on advertising. And so they're able to generate more income, which they desperately need now. I mean, I think that's pretty evident from the news around us. Yeah. As Justin Sampson from Barb said on the panel today, in the first half of this year, I believe, 0.6% of all Channel 4 viewing, so over 0.5% of all Channel 4 viewing was on YouTube. And that's not with a live feed. That's not with all of their series.
Yeah.
And I mentioned their success there in the report, and Channel 4 reposted it proudly, saying, yes, we are leading the way in public service media in the use of YouTube as a broadcast partner.
Yep.
I say things to heads. It's usually the heads of news at these organizations that I have an open disagreement with. And, someone said to me the other day in one of these meetings at a public service broadcaster, again in the Nordics, who said, well, so your entire reasoning for putting news live on YouTube at the same time that it's on the television is just to increase the size of the audience. And I said, yeah. What would be the other reason?
Yeah.
Do you need another reason?
Yeah.
And this person brought up the cannibalization again, and I said it's not proven true. Whether it's BT and Champions League or Channel 4 and their additive audience, there is zero evidence that it cannibalizes the traditional audience from the app or from the broadcast.
Yeah.
And I said, here's the thing: you can try it, and if you don't like it, you can stop.
Yeah.
If you find that I'm incorrect, just don't do it anymore. But definitely at least experiment. And I think what's happened, especially in the last 10 years, is the media ecosystem on both sides of the pond has gone from fear of missing out to fear of finding out. They're afraid of trying it because they're afraid of finding out what's going to happen on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And it's really paralyzing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that, do you think there's perhaps a older generation of decision makers in a lot of traditional media companies that are very happy. There may be 3-4 years to retirement. It's like, don't rock the boat. I'll just sort of see out my time before I make any really, what might be seen as brave decisions.
Yes and no. You look at Tim Davie at BBC, and as much as I think there is a bit of anxiety over a big change there, he pointed to the moon and said, by the end of this decade, we will be a fully digital, platform. So there are people, my age, and this is the Gen X generation. We're hopefully about to elect our first Gen X president in the United States. Imagine that. It's the first person of my generation to be president of the United States. I'm older than most of the people I'm talking to now.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's a generational thing as much as it is a cultural thing. And I think it's true on both sides of the Atlantic, which is that's not premium. That's social video. We don't do that. By the way, I get the same thing from filmmakers of all ages. Well, I have to be in cinema. I can't go direct to the consumer. That's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
What? Why?
Yeah.
If the consumer sees it as premium, then it's premium. You don't get to decide what is and isn't premium. The user, the audience gets to decide that.
Yeah.
And I think the discomfort that people feel is I studied an art form and now I have to change the way I distribute my art form or make my art form, and I don't wanna.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna is not a real good reason.
Yeah, it's a bit of snobbery as well, I think.
It is very much snobbery.
Yeah.
It is very much snobbery.
I mean, the conversation that I do have with a number of producers talking about social first and going digital first on projects, and it's just they there's an immediate sort of looking down their nose kind of attitude towards it, and it's like, well, why wouldn't you cultivate your own audiences? Why wouldn't you build your own brands direct? If you can make the finances work, and obviously it's a bit of a leap into the dark sometimes, but as you said, it's about experimenting.
And no more of a leap than spending €100,000 on a sizzle tape to try to sell a show to a bunch of people that aren't going to buy it.
Yeah.
Because they're not buying anything anymore. Right? That's the big gamble is I'm going to bet on selling to the big gatekeepers who are all going out of business very slowly, or they're all getting fired one by one.
Yeah.
And by the way, most of the money from the big gatekeepers is moving towards sports. And I had David Eilenberg on stage from Roku earlier today, and I said, what's the big trend? Where's the money going in programming? He said, sports.
Yeah.
There are going to be fewer and fewer shows made every year for the next couple of years, both factual and scripted. And so, the idea that you're above building your own audience on TikTok or YouTube, you can find the economics for it.
Yeah.
Not that this is the greatest example in the whole world, but Mr. Beast just got $100 million to make a game show. Jake Paul got $20 million to fight Mike Tyson on Netflix.
Yeah.
The reason they did this is because they bring their audiences with them. They actually have the leverage with the gatekeepers in a way that individual producers no longer do in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And we are in the user-centric era. The users are in complete control of the media ecosystem. And if you don't build your own community, you will lose to all the producers who do. RuPaul's Drag Race is a terrific example of this. This is a show that's been on the air, 100 years. Yeah. RuPaul is like 200 years old. It's a vampire, clearly. But one of the big reasons that show is so successful is because Randy and Fenton at World of Wonder started talking to their audience on day one before there was social media.
Yeah, yeah.
They have a direct relationship with them.
And they have their own platform as well, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
You want another good example, Reese Witherspoon. One of the reasons why Reese Witherspoon is one of the most successful producers of content in the world is she has a email list of book club that is the most powerful piece of IP generation in the world. She buys the rights to books, she turns them personally into bestsellers, and then she options those bestsellers as television and film.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift has the most powerful army of fans on the planet.
Yeah.
She self-financed and self-distributed her own film last year, which became the single largest concert film in the history of cinema. Yeah. Ryan Kaji started his YouTube channel when he was 4 years old. He now does $250 million a year. He's 12, by the way. He does $250 million a year in merch sales. He self-financed and self-distributed his own film. Yeah. Catface Productions. They make animated videos on Minecraft, and then they release them on YouTube. They employ 80 people at their studio. I can go on and on and on and on. You are missing the wave.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a producer, as Quentin Tarantino once said when he was premiering Reservoir Dogs at the Sundance Film Festival, just make it. Just go out and start making it. Find your fucking audience. But if you're not prepared to do that, I'm telling you, you will lose to those who do. Yeah.
And a final question to end on, Evan, and thank you for being so generous with your time.
My pleasure.
You know, interesting that you talked about that sort of reality of fewer and fewer programs being commissioned. I mean, we're already seeing that, and we have done certainly for the last year.
Yeah, and it started before the strike. It started, this was happening already.
Yeah. And therefore, if fewer and fewer shows are going to get commissioned, that means that fewer and fewer people are going to get employed, both on the production side and presumably the network side, because they're slimming down. We keep seeing week after week, you know, different announcements from Paramount and various other networks and media companies that they're shedding staff. And I know this is something that's very, you know, you're very passionate about, you know, helping people to think who work in the industry in a different way rather than waiting for this sort of axe to fall.
Right.
What is the one single piece of advice you would give anybody watching this who works in the media industry and is thinking, I'm not sure if I'm going to have a job in a year's time? What would be your piece of advice to them?
The biggest piece of advice I can give you is wake up stupid every day. Learn something new about something new every day. If you want to future-proof your career, you have to understand where the money is going. So the corporate gatekeeper content economy is going to continue to contract for the rest of this decade. It's not done getting smaller. There's going to be not just layoffs, but there's going to be mergers and acquisitions. There's going to be tremendous consolidation in the next 36 months. Yeah. Paramount's first. Disco Brothers, Warner Brothers Discovery is next. Who knows what's going to happen at Disney? They just pushed off their succession planning for a year and a half, succession planning. So, you know, but this money is going to the creator economy. And I know this because Google and Amazon and Meta and Apple and Microsoft, the biggest companies in the history of the world, need the creator economy to continue to expand. Yeah. Right? I know this because all of the advertising agencies and all of the brands are much more reliant on the creator-led content economy to sell their products than they are the television economy. Yeah. Meta will sell more advertising this year than all traditional television on the planet Earth. One company. 60% of all advertising on the planet, not all digital advertising, all advertising goes to Meta, Google, and Amazon. Yeah. So go where the money is going. Also, there's a tremendous amount of great content and marketing and innovative things being done on the brand side. So go work at companies who are making content. Look at what is going to happen when Walmart finally gets to buy Vizio. Yeah. Look at what's going to happen in this.
Well, brands are going to be kind of entertainers, essentially.
They are.
They?
Chick-fil-A just started a fast channel in the United States.
Starbucks Studio and
Correct. So there's going to be a tremendous retail media is now the fastest growing segment of the advertising economy. So there is a lot of money flying around. Yeah. And there's a lot of really fun. Remember fun? Remember when working in media was fun? Yeah. It's not fun anymore. I'm having a great time. Yeah. But I talk to the people who work in media, and they are not. Yeah. There is fun being had. There's joy being had. There's lots of great stuff being made, but it's not in the big gatekeeper economy the same way that it used to be. You have to look at where the future is going, where the money is going, and frankly, where all the good work is being made right
Where's
now.
a bit more freedom.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Evan, thank you so much. It's been a joy to speak to you as ever.
It's always good to talk
Thank you so much. Hello, guys. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Justin.
How are you finding MIPCOM? Are you having a good time? Are you guys like back to back with meetings?
Well, it's a funny market for us because we deal with brands, and there aren't that many brands here.
Yes.
So I think that's a shout out, Justin. It's up to you to bring in a contingent of brands and and then they'll have new toys to play with.
Yeah, well, we'll do what we can. The last time I was here was at Cannes Lions, which is a very different affair, obviously, and the Croisette is full of brands doing remarkable things in entertainment. But let's start talking about the growth that brand-funded programming has had over the past few years. From your perspective, starting with you, Roberta, what's driving that shift? How's the landscape change for brands and content creators, do you think?
Actually, I think we are in a very interesting moment for the branded funded life cycle. We are kind of at third stage right now. It's like if we were playing in a third league, in a new league at the moment. We started basically from product placement, so putting the products in the stories. Then we moved on into brand-funded programming from scratch to be able to find premium slots in broadcasters. And now we're jumping into a new way of working together with brands and broadcasters, like co-producing programs. So I think this is a nice time to be in this business because you can play a lot with business models. You can find hybrid spaces to work with. So I think it's very interesting to test something new also in financial modeling. And I find this very interesting and exciting.
Yeah. It seems like a brave new world, but obviously it's not so new, is it? I mean, brands have been involved in entertainment right from the very beginning, and soap operas were actually, created from brands going back many decades. Javier, how are you seeing growth from your perspective?
I think there are several factors, but I would point four. The first of all is authenticity. Consumers are looking for content that is real, is credible, and brands know it, and they need to reach their targets in that way if they want to get them engaged. The second is the results. The results are proven, and the brands are realizing about that, so they are investing more and more. Because they see the results. Also, there are less barriers of entry. Now the brands are becoming more producers, so they do their own content. They don't have these kind of intermediaries to do their stuff and to launch it and to get their content distributed in many different ways. And yes, it's like a D2C model somehow. So I think these are the number of factors that the industry is changing. There is a shift in perspective in that way, and we are eager to embrace it.
Yeah.
Even though it's not easy. As you mentioned, there is an evolving from the product placement to branded content, and this is very interesting and very.
Yeah.
We need to embrace it, and we need to keep pushing. But of course, still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and obviously the advent of social media and YouTube in particular, we've seen lots of brands becoming entertainment providers in their own right, really, and creating their own programming, which is perhaps the next phase. But maybe we'll talk about that in a second. Sam, now you work with some of the biggest global brands out there when it comes to integrating entertainment into their strategies. Can you tell us a little bit about the brands that you work with and how you ensure that they make their content authentic?
Authentic. We're going to keep coming back to those words, aren't we? So I think the power of UTA is we know what's coming next. So we have upstream knowledge of every project in development because somebody has called one of our agents. Can I have your writer, your producer, your director? We'll log the project. So I also represent brands as well as the rest of the agency representing talent. So I can say, hey, brand X, your brand values are this, and here are 15 projects across the world that I know are coming through. Let's start talking to the producers or the writers early on. Let's get into the writer's room. Let's speak to the showrunner. And let's see how we can really make it an organic and authentic integration rather than just shoehorning in something at the last minute.
And that's really important, getting involved right at the beginning of the project, which I imagine is something you might all agree with rather than that sort of badging of yesterday. This is very much about integrating brands into content right at the inception stage.
DNA plus DNA.
Yeah. And can you give us some examples of brands that you're working with and some of the recent campaigns that you've worked on?
Well, as Roberta said before, it's all about reinventing the business model. And I know she's the queen of doing that. You have to be creative, we've seen, I mean, we were laughing before this and saying we're like the Got Talent hosts with the branded water on the desk.
Yeah.
So that's one way of doing it. But another way is, if you are a strong category leader as a brand, can you make unbranded content? But your brand values are so embedded in the content that they shine through, and then the brand can post sponsorship bumpers and ads around it. So one client I work with a lot is Ancestry, and they are fantastic, and they do shout about unbranded branded content. They will do shows about genealogy and family history and DNA that do not mention the brand Ancestry.com, do not show the website or someone spitting in a tube, which they're never going to do anyway.
Yeah.
But because they are market leaders in that category, they know once that program airs, there'll be a massive upside for them as a brand, and that's smart.
Right, and they have that confidence of knowing that as they're a brand leader, they're the first brand that anyone turns to talk about them.
And so they'll put sponsorship bumpers at the beginning of the end. They'll buy advertising media around the show. They'll use social and digital to amplify it, but the show itself remains intact.
Right, okay. Javier, so YouFirst Originals operate at the intersection of sport and talent and media and lots of different areas. How do you tailor brand-funded content within your business in a way that resonates with the right audiences and delivering value for the brands at the same time?
Keep the content first, keep it original, and work with the brands since the beginning, in a very, very early stage, as you mentioned. Because this is the key to success. You have to keep the content very natural and integrate the brand in a way that feels very organic. This way ensures that the content is still valuable for the audience, and also then you can amplify and build products or transmedia products around the content itself in where the brand can have more presence, so it's a combination of, let's say, more traditional advertising and the pure branded content is what the brands are actually realizing. They don't want to invade the content with so much product or logos. They want to keep it real and authentic and keep the audience engaged. So that's our model. That's what we try to do. It's not always easy because, you have brands that are not that with that mindset. But yes, that's our focus. Yeah.
And actually, let's take a moment to talk about your business. So, YouFirst. Can you just explain anybody that hasn't come across YouFirst? Tell us about your business.
Okay, because it's not easy to explain. I will try to be short and clear. Well, YouFirst is a 22 almost year company. It's a talent agency. We represent over 1,000 talents worldwide, amongst NBA players, soccer players, basketball players. Now in Spain, we have a big portfolio of celebrities and influencers, other verticals such as DJs, or now we are entering the actors scene as well. So this is the core business, and then we have 3 more business units, which are also big. Brand services, of course. We work in 7 countries with over 100 brands in a daily basis, with a workforce of 50 people just in Spain. And then we have the content business. In the content business, I try to summarize, it's divided in 3 different lines: branded entertainment, a podcast company that we acquired last year, Originals, which is the unit that I'm leading. It's a premium outfit, talent-driven content, especially for streamers, and also working with brands. And a YouTube company that we handle over 200 YouTube channels worldwide, amongst sports and content creators, etc. And a big data company in the UK. So just to summarize the picture, is talent, brands, content, and big data. Just a brief summarize.
Well, what?
Kind of everything. Of course, the talent is our DNA and it's our value proposition, and this is what we are built for. We work for talent, but we also work for brands and properties, and we utilize this value to propose something unique to the market.
Yeah. Well,
it's in brief. Hopefully, it's clear.
It certainly, it does. I mean, it certainly seems like a developing model, and much in the way that I think UTA is involved in creating content and managing artists and working with brands. I mean, it really feels like it's a next generation of branded content. So very exciting businesses.
Very challenging.
Yeah. Roberta, now Fremantle is obviously a very long history of creating content across multiple genres. How do you approach the creative process when working on brand-funded projects? And I know there's a number that you've launched very recently and you're working on at the moment. Do you find it challenging to balance those creative and commercial goals?
Yeah, this is very tricky, and this is the point of contrast between the producers and the brands, and we are just in the middle of that, facilitating this process. We are, again, the experts of this process that is changing a lot. Luckily, we have over 65 labels across the whole company in all the territories, so we are able, once we receive a brief from a brand, to basically select and assess all the projects from the pipeline and slate of every brand, of every label, that might fit with the brand's brief. So this is a very long process, but in the end, it's very effective because we can select, we can cherry pick what is most fitting with the brand's brief. So we have this luck of having this whole network of labels working for documentaries, scripted, unscripted, and fast channels and digital. So we can really tap into what it's been under commission and jump into those projects because it's always better not to start from scratch with an original content, but to tap into projects that are already under the radar of the broadcasters or platforms to be more effective in the last part of the funnel. And also, there's a chance for all the labels to put forward projects that are in the back of their minds that have never been released or presented to broadcasters or platforms, but they want to put forward because it really fits with the brand values of the brand involved. So it's really a very dynamic approach. We go back and forth, we assess, we select all the labels, and then we come up with a very compelling project, selecting what we think is the best one.
Yeah, and are you? It's a huge business that you have at Fremantle. I mean, are you finding that brand-funded programming is becoming more and more important within the overall business?
I do think so. It's very, it's very difficult to balance again the storytelling against the brand presence. We don't want, obviously, the brand to overpower the content. So we have to be very careful and select, as you were saying, the right brands that want to do this jump into the unknown because you never know if it's going to be successful, if it's going to be effective, the ROI, all the measurement thing. It's a big issue at the moment, and it will always be, I think. So it's a matter of finding the right projects, the right brands that fit with, again, a certain type of storytelling, which will be, again, authentic, meaningful, and very organic and seamless to the content that we want to deliver. Then there's a whole evangelization towards the producers that we keep doing. It's, it's lasting for years. I think will last forever because producers are, do want to have their own content in place, but we need to translate the needs from the brand. So, for example, we hired a person, a creative specialist in our team that is just translating the needs from the brands to the producers and back.
Right.
And I think this is key. It's becoming very, key for this process to
have a link person, essentially.
A link person in our global team, the branded team, to really translate those briefs into producers. What do you want to do with that? You have to deliver brand values. You have to match those brand values and forget about the brand placement in the content. It's something else. This is not easy because producers have something in mind that doesn't relate with what the brand wants sometimes. So you need to have a facilitator, let's say an enabler in your team to be able to do so. And it's a whole team effort, again, on a daily basis. It's all about,
the last thing you
internal
need
culture.
is a difficult marketing director and getting involved in a very delicate production. It's sort of, there's lots of potential pitfalls there. But that sounds very smart that you've got somebody in place to do that. So Sam, coming to you, looking at the advantages then of brands investing in brand-funded programming as opposed to traditional advertising, what do you see the main benefits for brands from a cultural perspective?
Who watches ads?
Yeah.
Who watches linear TV?
Yeah.
I think those are the two key questions. And so if people aren't watching that type of content, you need to be inside of the content in order to get eyeballs. And I think what's key is finding the right content. Like there's little value in making a great piece of content that goes on a really tiny channel and no one sees and isn't going to break through in culture. There's a lot of value in identifying what is going to be a culture-defining moment and being inside that particular show. So you don't always know. I mean, I always say White Lotus because it's such an incredible show. But imagine if you'd read that script and said, okay, some really rich people go to a hotel, act completely sport, and someone gets murdered. You know, would brands want to be inside of that? Hell no.
No.
However, it's been extremely successful. Brands are all over it by series 3, and it has been a culture-defining moment. So can you know, there are tools to kind of detect what might break through, but it's also the magic. Who thought Squid Game was going to break through? So sometimes there's a bit of luck, sometimes there's a bit of data and insight and all those tools that can help you detect those gems. But it's important to be, you know, either in something that's really solid, so we've got the big brothers and they've got talents that will keep on delivering audiences even in a non-linear world, and then you've got these little cultural moments like Traitors or Squid Game that you would have guessed.
And the algorithm won't necessarily pick those up, right? And AI is not going to take over content creation just yet, hopefully. But Javier, now audiences are more discerning now than ever before when it comes to content, and I think there's ever raising expectations about the quality of content. How do you think that you maintain trust with viewers when you're creating shows? I mean, what's the secret to ensuring that content doesn't feel like that extended ad? And we touched on it earlier on with Sam was talking about Ancestry, this unbranded content, which seems a really, really brave move on the part of a brand. I mean, is that the future, do you think? And whereas a brand actually activates it outside the actual show itself, or what's your views on that?
Well, I think the models are very different in each case, no? But yes, I think the future is just working with brands that understand that if they want to enter in the branded content universe, they need to focus on telling great stories. And the rest, you can build it in a way that can impact your audience in different ways, like, as I said, transmedia products, with the talent themselves, with other type of activations that the brands can have more presence in the content. It's not like, okay, you're going to play this game just in your way. No, this game is different, and you have to understand that you are telling stories because you want to build your audience. You want to create a community of fans. You want to show your customers that your values and your brand's propositions is cool, and they're gonna like it, and your story is amazing, and that way, it's only about content. So the more organically you keep the story and the brands involved in the content, the better for the purpose, no? So yes, and then of course amplify these opportunities with other type of products, transmedia elements, talent, social media, etc. Then it's another thing. But brand content itself, you have to keep it real, authentic. You want to do it well. Look at Red Bull, for example. No, it's amazing. No, they're pioneers and
well, they really created, I suppose, that a new generation of brand-funded programming, didn't they? And they still do. And there's amazing content you see right across platforms.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Roberta, brand safety is really a hot topic, especially with the rise of digital platforms. How do you navigate ensuring that both the content and the brand align with the values of the audience and the platform? How do you, how do you make sure that brand safety is at the forefront of what you're working on?
It also depends on the, let's say, Ofcom regulation in all the countries that we are working with. So we are very careful about delivering a content that is really aligning with the local regulations. But also in general, this is very key now to understand, to take care of with our producers and writers, to come up with a content that is brand safe And it's, can be niche and a broad one, but it has to be in line with the brief, as always. I think with the rising of the platforms, this is something very that we need to address a lot more. For example, with Ferrero, we have developed this short series on YouTube, on their YouTube channel for kids. And it's about the wildlife of caps in their ecosystems, and it's all pure editorial content. And despite the Ofcom regulation that where we don't, where we can't have this content live on YouTube because it's for kids and it's chocolate, but we find a way doing that purely editorial to deliver a great content for kids that is, brand safe and it's really, really nice. And then besides the YouTube channel, it will be also distributed on platforms. So it's really up to, touch multiple platforms for different target audiences like kids and Gen Z. This multiplies the opportunities for our world, for our branded funded ecosystem.
Yeah. Now, as streaming services and digital platforms evolve, Sam, where do you see the biggest growth opportunities now for brand funded programming?
Well, streamers are going to have to change their tune a little bit. There's all kinds of ways to get into streaming content, whether it's through a off-air brand partnership, or we've seen Emily in Paris, which is chock-a-block with product placement and branded integrations. But it's still a little bit fuzzy. People aren't sure. The way most of my clients get into streamers is through prop placement. So there's no payment involved, but we look after the brand and we gift the product to the production.
Well, that's interesting because there are different types
Because there's no compliance then.
Yeah.
I could do that for BBC as well.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got prop placement, you have brand-funded programming, and what are the other ways that you work with brands?
Product placement. So the product placement will be paid, and we were talking about brand safety before.
Yeah.
And that would be working very closely with the costume designer or the set designer whom we know and saying, this is going to be on air for this many minutes, touched by this particular character. And once you've paid for that, you've got those guarantees.
Right.
Or you give it to them and...
You see if it actually makes the edit.
Yeah, but if you have a good relationship with the people who are creating the show, then there shouldn't be a brand safety issue because you've already checked all the boxes. And you're helping them because they need to decorate their set.
Yeah.
And they need authentic products to make it look real.
Yeah.
And then brand funded, which is from the bottom up, that the brand gets involved, and it can be money, but it can be in kind. So back to Ancestry, they'll provide research or DNA testing kits or genealogists, but may not put cash in. And then the fourth way is co-marketing. So the show's gone on air. How does the brand maximise that IP and use it for their own gain, but also driving viewers back to the show itself? So that's a really nice symbiotic way for brands to work with any piece of content.
Yeah. Now, as I just mentioned, there's different types of ways that brands can get incorporated into programming, and I imagine there's quite a few misconceptions, in terms of from a brand perspective, and also potentially from a producer perspective as well. What can you each of you give me an example of what the most common misconceptions you think that there are, that you come across on a daily basis? Javier, have you?
The very common is the expectations that the brand has against the talent and what the producers we want and the streamers. So, well, this is a complex equation. You need to be in the middle, juggling with all interest, and this is always the same. I mean, it's very, very common, and it's very frequent to have this kind of, let's say, situations in which you have to put everything in order, especially the brand's expectation. They have to be really aware of what they're going to achieve, what they are going to have, and what you're going to be able to provide at the end. Both in content, distribution, promotion, and everything. So this is very, very common. This is, I guess, it happens to you as well all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same for you, Roberta. Is that?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned before the combination of teams that know the language of brands and content is key. And nowadays there is a lack of people that are experts in both worlds. In our case, we have a workforce with brands and in content, so we are very well integrated. But it's true that the traditional TV producers or producers well, they have not that much expertise because it's normal. And when it comes to a brand-funded programming, they have these kind of issues because they want to defend their content and the brand want to defend their interests. And, well, it's a process. It's a process. So either you have someone in the middle that address that situation, or you have a combined team that understand the whole thing and can treat it properly. You know? So
Communication sounds like very important, right? It's the key watchword in brand-funded programming.
And people that are really, really aware of what they are doing and what they want to achieve, you know? Because otherwise it's a nightmare. No, you have teams against teams, no. But I think now that it's changing, especially because of the need of money. That's true. The industry is suffering. And, well, producer needs funds to get things away. And, well, the brand funding seems to be an opportunity.
It seems like a perfect time because there's less and less money for content, and
Exactly.
There's still a huge appetite for content.
But Justin, the problem is that sometimes producers think that a brand is going to come along and fund whatever, 100%, wherever it goes.
So that's a misconception on the production side.
I was about to tell this.
Yeah.
And they think they have a lot of money
Yeah.
to invest. Sometimes it's just,
For a tiny digital channel, and they think they're going to fully fund something versus being on Netflix, not understanding that it's all about that
return on
ROI.
investment.
Well, I mean that's really interesting. The fact of new brands coming into the marketplace and becoming entertainment brands in their own right. But I'm not going to ask any figures, but how do you calculate the value of a brand-funded programming deal, whether it be product placement or prop placement, should I say? How do you calculate it? I mean, how does the producer know to charge $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million?
When it comes to brand funded, it's about production costs basically on the program you are developing. So it's up to the label to come up with the cost.
It's based on the budget. It's
the budget. It's the budget given how many episodes, the structure of the program, and also where it's going to be live. It's going to be on air because it depends from streamers to broadcasters. I mean, the time slots, whether it's daytime or prime time, it really depends on the level of production effort you're doing. And then there's the media value, obviously. So the fact that you're, going to a premium slots or daytime slots, it really, varies the media value of the project. But this is for, let's say, brand funded and product placement. Product placement, it's easier because it comes with a broadcaster, a commercial team. So there are rates, there are precise price lists to match with the media value of those broadcasters. So that's easy. It's different from when it comes to scripted, for example. Scripted is a whole. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, I think.
Yes, we are. We've got a panel session tomorrow at 9:45 in the Producers Hub. So if you're in Cannes, come down, and we're going to go into lots more detail on lots of different aspects. So make sure you're there. But yes, absolutely.
On the scripted, it's even more tricky because you don't know how much the theatrical project will be, where it will be distributed. Because at the very beginning, you don't know exactly when you start writing that where this will be distributed. So you don't know the exact value of the distribution of that product scripted, whether it's a movie or a TV series or whatever. So it's very difficult to come up with a price. So sometimes it's you match the production needs, you match the production value. You have to really balance a little bit the presence of the brand.
The client's budget.
The client's budget, exactly.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you calculate, because at the end of the day, you have a client that is going to tell you, look, I have this, and I cannot spend more than this. Oh, okay, so you need to adjust and tweak and redo things, no? It's
That's the final point then. It's like, that's the brand's budget, right? Because they're the ones that are spending the money.
Of course, you need to value a lot of factors and consider distribution, media evaluation, budget, etc., and exposure, whatever. But yes, at the end of the day, you have to deal with the reality of the budget.
Well,
yes, and
I'm sure we could go into much more detail about other different pots of budgets that are around brands and media agencies and everything else. But so one final question for each of you. For everybody watching today who's interested in exploring the world of brand-funded programming, probably from a producer perspective, what's the one piece of key advice you would give them as they as everybody, all producers are looking for more money at the moment, what's the one piece of advice you would give new producers moving into brand-funded programming world?
Hire a translator. So whether that translator is sitting in-house or whether you're hiring an agency, but someone who sits between the brand and the producer, speaks both languages and can make sure everyone's happy.
All right. Okay. Roberta?
To me, it's do programs that everybody wants to watch in the end, generally, because sometimes brands brief us on something that nobody will ever see and watch. So it's very important to come up with ideas that are competitive towards other contents. We have lots of contents to watch nowadays, so we really need to be in the heart of what's interesting for the audience, obviously, and also for broadcasters. So it doesn't matter if it's a niche project or a very broad project, but it has to be in the radar of the broadcaster and the streamers to be able to then be distributed, because you can have the most beautiful brand-funded program from the creative point of view, but then if it's not distributed, there's
Nobody's
no point.
going to watch
Nobody's
it,
gonna
then
watch
it's no good
it,
for anybody. Yeah.
And so sometimes we try to, disrupt the brief from the client, trying to direct into other directions, because it's going to be, most, likely to be distributed and to be produced by broadcasters. So, yeah.
Okay. And Javier, what's your piece of advice, would you say?
You already said, but I would say like 3 pillars, no? In addition to what my colleagues mentioned. Great content, great talent attached, and great distribution. For us, these 3 pillars are the key to do this business. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on Telecast live from the Palais. We could talk for a lot longer, and there's lots of different questions that I have, but we are going to get through some of those on the panel tomorrow. So looking forward to that. Again, 9:45 in the Producers Hub on day 3 of MIPCOM. Well, that's about it from day 2 of the Telecast live from the Palais. Thanks a lot for watching. Well, that's about it from our MIPCOM Day 2 highlight show. To check out other videos featuring the movers and shakers of the content industry, including days 1 and 3 of MIPCOM, just hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.